Welcome to Maths with EJD. This is the second video on game theory. In the previous one, I talked about I had introduced the idea of games, right? Saying that games are actually game theory is actually a branch of mathematics, which deals with strategic interactions between groups, entities, individuals in such a way that the fate of each individual involved in the game depends on everybody involved in the game, right? So here we're talking about types of games. So first we'll start with the classification of games. How do we actually classify games? Classification, classification of games. So games are broadly classified into cooperative and non-cooperative games. Okay. We have cooperative games and non-cooperative games. So let's look at cooperative games first of all. In cooperative games, right, players form alliances or coalitions to achieve shared goals. So a very good example of that would be political parties. Political parties, though they are rivals or something, but they can come together sometimes. So to work on something common. Political parties working together to pass legislation. So you can also see it in terms of countries coming together to to achieve a common purpose, right? For instance, you have NATO, you have BRICS, you have ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, and you have all of those you have ASEAN in Asia, ASEAN for Southeast Asian countries. So, and they try to promote business and things like that. So that's a very good example of cooperative games. So in non-cooperative games, right, what happens is that everybody is doing their thing. Non-cooperative games. So here, um, players act independently. Players act, okay, some perfectionism right here. Players act independently. They act independently and prioritize. So they act independently, prioritizing, and they prioritize individual objectives. Individual objectives. They may be competing, they may not be competing, but they do not come together. Everybody is just doing their thing. So a good example of non-cooperative games would be a situation where competition is involved, like in businesses. So you have businesses competing in a market is a very good example of non-cooperative games. Businesses competing in a market, in a market. So that's a very good example of non-cooperative games. All right, so let's talk about um, zero sum versus non-zero sum games. Zero sum versus non-zero sum games. Okay, now, first of all, zero sum games. Zero sum games. So in zero sum games, right? One player's gain, one player's gain is exactly another's loss. So if I gain 10 naira, the it automatically means that my opponent, the other person playing with me, has lost 10 naira. That's the idea of a zero sum game. So we have this kind of thing in chess or poker. So if someone wins in chess or poker, it means the other person has lost. That's a zero sum game. So it's more like a one. So the winner is gets like +1 and the loser gets like -1, such that my +1 -1 is zero. So it's like that's why we have the idea of a zero sum game. Okay. Let's talk about a non-zero sum game. Non-zero sum game. So here, all players can gain or lose, can gain or lose simultaneously. They can gain or lose simultaneously. A very good example would be trade negotiations. So you have trade negotiations where both parties, where both parties benefit. So everybody get their own part. Okay, that's about zero sum and non-zero sum games. Then we can also talk about um symmetric and asymmetric games. Symmetric versus asymmetric games. Okay. So first of all, talking about symmetric games, what do we mean? Symmetric games. So here, players players have identical strategies. Players have identical strategies and rules. Identical strategies and rules. So a good example of that would be rock, paper, scissors. Okay. Everybody's expected to either come up with a rock or a paper or a scissors in each round of the game. That's a symmetric game. Everybody knows what is expected of everybody. And it's the same. They're identical. So like that. Okay. Now, how about asymmetric games? Asymmetric games. So for asymmetric games, right? Players players have different players have different roles and strategies. Okay. Example, a very good example will be buyer-seller negotiations. Buyer-seller negotiations. So of course the buyer he just wants to buy at the best price possible, and the seller wants to sell at the best price possible. So they don't have the same strategy. Probably the buyer has options, and if the seller is not giving the correct price, they can move on, or the seller doesn't care. If you are not ready to buy at their at the price at which they are selling, they don't care. I mean, all of this, unlike rock paper scissors, everybody knows exactly what they expected of every other person. Okay, so let's talk about static versus dynamic games. Static versus dynamic games. So here, first of all, starting with static games, Okay. In static games, decisions are made simultaneously. Decisions are made simultaneously. Okay. Without knowing others' choices. Without knowing others' choices. Without knowing others' choices. So you don't find out what is going to happen until it has been done. Okay. Unlike dynamic games, I was going to say, and a very good example of static game will be the prisoner's dilemma. I'm very sure as we proceed in this course, in this series, we'll definitely come across prisoner's dilemma. Probably will actually look at a practical situation, practical, the practicality of the prisoner's dilemma, so to speak. Okay. All right. So let's talk about dynamic games now. Dynamic games. So static games, decisions are made simultaneously and each player doesn't know what the other player is going to do. But for dynamic games, it's more like I take a move, I make a move, then you make a move, and we keep on like that. That's the idea of dynamic games. So here, decisions unfold over time. Decisions unfold over time with with reacting, with players reacting to previous moves. So if I do something based on what I have done, make your own move. After you make your move, based on what you have, based on the move you make, I'll also make my own move. That's the idea of dynamic games. So a very good example of this would be, as you can tell, chess, or generally board games, right? Chess or multi-stage, multi chess or multi-stage business negotiations. Maybe I think an auction should fit into this because somebody comes and say, "Oh, I'm going to get this for $1,000." Somebody else says, "No, I'm going to pay 2005," and then it goes on like that. So that's a dynamic game happening right there. So most board games, in Nigeria, like, right, we have Ludo and Mancala. I think in Africa we have Mancala. I think in many other parts of the world there's Mancala. So so I make a move. After you're done, the other person make their move, and that is the idea of dynamic games. Okay. So multi-state business negotiation. So we offer this price and you say, no, you don't want that. This is what you want. And we keep on like that until we get to a point where we both agree that, okay, this is what we want to do. All right. So a very good activity in this area may be to classify the following scenarios into the types of games discussed. Okay, let me, I think it's important to do this, like some kind of practice question, which is very cool. So let me just say activity. I think I should just call that activity. So you want to try this out. Classify the following scenarios. Classify the following scenarios into the types, into the types of games discussed. Okay. So the first one is this. Two companies, two companies deciding advertising, deciding advertising budgets without prior knowledge of the other's plans. You can tell me in the comment section uh what kind of game this is, okay? Then number two, you have countries, you have countries forming coalitions, countries forming coalitions for climate change agreements, like all the COP conferences, countries forming coalitions for climate change agreements. What kind of game is that? Okay. Then we have three. What about competitors in a sports match? Competitors in a sports match. What kind of game is that? So you can classify them into as many kind of games as possible. Okay. All right, so you can see that game theory provides a structured approach to understanding strategic interactions and decision making. So, and by categorizing games, right, we can better analyze and predict behaviors. Okay, I guess I just want to write this. Um, is some kind of summary or conclusion, if you like. Um, Summary. Okay, by categorizing games, by categorizing games, we can better, we can better analyze, we can better analyze and predict behaviors. We can better analyze and predict behaviors in a variety of fields, in a variety of fields and scenarios and scenarios. Okay. All right, so Joe, we've seen already that game theory provides a structured approach to understanding strategic interactions and decision making. So by categorizing such games, we can better analyze and predict behaviors in a variety of fields and scenarios. So this is the second lesson in this series. So more is still coming. So make sure you have you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get alerted each time a new video is released. Then comment. Let me know the top if you want me to teach a topic or you want me to take to solve a particular problem. So comment. Then also like and share so that more people can have access to this great content. Till I come your way again, keep playing the games of life very well. Bye.